Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and I am so pleased to present to you 12 new episodes, including this one that have gone live in the library overnight. It's a very special episode exploring location-specific tenancy guidelines for 11 different locations, 11 of them. And this is the summary episode. I'm going to introduce you to all of these 11 locations, including my first non-North American location. Here we go. So in this tranche, you hear about Minnesota, Prince Edward Island, Washington, D.C., South Carolina, Kentucky, Illinois, Colorado, the Yukon Territory, New Jersey, Queensland, Australia, and the Pacific Islands, which includes American Samoa, Guam, and the CNMI. And I'll tell you what that is here in a sec. Yeah, I don't remember what that is. That's okay. I'll go through it. But this episode isn't the actual episode. This is just the summary of the episodes, which is live for you in the library right now. So you'll see 6 US states, 1 Australian state, 1 US district, 1 US territory, 1 Canadian province, 1 Canadian territory. I just mentioned there is a dedicated podcast for each one of these live in the library right now in My Life as a Landlord. You can find them on the platform that you're listening to now or on the website, mylifeasalandlord.com. Just go to episodes and search for many of the location-specific episodes there. There's a bunch now. And this tranche marks the end of 2025 for My Life as a Landlord. It's 201 episodes. Thank you so much for all of that. And those are all live in the library right now. Now, in all of my location-specific episodes, I do go into extreme detail by screen sharing, reviewing hyperlinks to the state, province, landlord, tenant code, etc. Anything that I can find that is even interesting, even if it's not real estate or business related, I still throw it in there because I think it's kind of cool. Everything I could possibly find to help you get started, including phone numbers, emails, web pages, associations, Facebook groups, much more, anything that I can find, we just throw it in. You never just know what's going to come out in these location-specific podcasts. And one truth I've learned, no place is the same as any other. They are all different. And even if I get the exact perfect way for landlording on the episode, 5 minutes after I'm done recording, it could all change again. I also learned that so many resources about how to help landlords just like you and me in these locations and beyond. And I cannot wait to share them with you for this amazing podcast and the YouTube channel. Now, I can't do everything at once. As you know, throughout 2025, I have been releasing these tranches of location-specific episodes. And as of today, I have 41 locations across the globe that are live. And by the end of 2026, I'm moving into Europe, Asia, and further into Australia. Today is the first time that I'm going into Australia. Very, very cool researching Queensland. So regarding the 11 areas in the location-specific podcast that just went live overnight, let's talk about the 4 areas that are my framework for all of these episodes, and we'll go through a few examples. Each of my location-specific podcasts is set up in the exact same way, answering the same 4 questions. What are the basics of that area? What are the nuances of that area? What's weird or stands out? What about guidance regarding abandoned personal property? And I'm not talking cars, I'm just talking personal property that a tenant leaves behind. What about that? And then 4th is, what about getting help in that local area? Where do you even start? Who could even get you going in the right direction? Now, here's a sample of what you can expect from this tranche of location-specific podcasts. Okay, Minnesota. Minnesota does not have a set security deposit amount for the state. Minneapolis does have a set security deposit. And if you have a landlord, you as a landlord has 12 units or less, you are permitted to have non-written/oral leases. Now, you probably shouldn't do that, but you're allowed to. Late fees can be as high as an 8% flat fee. And as long as this is in writing in the lease, it has to be in the lease about that flat fee. 2 cold winter aspects in Minnesota. First, if the tenant departs between October 15th and April 15th, they must provide the landlord with a 3-day notice so the landlord can take precautions against frozen pipes. That's important. Second, no heating utilities can be cut off if tenants are making less than a certain income amount between those 2 dates, October 15th and April 15th. And there are some specifics on exactly what kind of heating utility and cannot include external fuel tanks, firewood, et cetera, et cetera. So the heat in Minnesota is very important in tenancies, as you can imagine. And I wonder how many times there is abandonment and they don't give the 3-day notice and the pipes do freeze. I bet that does happen. Goodness. Prince Edward Island in Canada. What an interesting location. I've never seen one like it, and it will always stand out to me. The PEI Residential Tenancy Act specifically states that minors and those under 18 years old are covered by the act. I've never had another location state something that specific. Also in PEI, this is what stands out. The rent runs with the unit, not the tenant. Oh my goodness. In fact, in a new lease with a new tenant, the landlord must disclose the previous tenant's rent amount. And again, that is for the space, not the person. That's crazy because that means that you can't jump up to market rent in between tenants. I've never seen any place do that before. Prince Edward Island also uses the term ordinary cleanliness when referring to housekeeping standards during tenancy, which I thought was interesting. Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. Fixed leases convert to periodic automatically, and while some units are under rent control, others are not. Rent increases can only be once per year, and for rent control units, they're limited to the Consumer Price Index. For elderly and disabled tenants with units under rent control that meet certain criteria, rent increases are limited to the annual Consumer Price Index. For units not under rent control, rent increases are limited to 2% above the annual Consumer Price Index. Lots of calculating in Washington, D.C. South Carolina, the Palmetto State, allows your tenants to pay the security deposit via money and property. Although I'm not sure how that would work, you are allowed to pay it by property. Renter's insurance is mentioned as a good idea in South Carolina. And if a tenant's rent payment is late, if your lease says, quote unquote, in big print, no additional notice will be provided. That means that your tenant has 5 days to pay before a late fee is due as well. Further, if rent is not paid and there is no indication of the tenant in the unit, after 15 days, the unit is deemed abandoned. Kentucky. Also, Kentucky also stands out. I got to tell you, that episode, it kind of traumatized me. So if you want some education about what not to do, Kentucky, you're not doing it right. Super confusing that the state has 2 different sets of tenancy governing documents. I could barely follow either one. I reviewed what I could find for both documents, but it was very disjointed. And admittedly, I need to interview an attorney doing Kentucky landlord law because it was super confusing. Some things to note included the definitions of willful and unconscionable. A security deposit is negotiable. It could be 1 or 2 months rent held in a Kentucky or U.S. banking institution as a separate account, and the location and the account number must be provided to the tenant. Further, one of the documents has a very good lease checklist, that was helpful as a guide if you wanted to add that to your lease addendum. I was actually shocked at how good this lease checklist was for it was for a prospective tenant to check the lease on making sure that their lease had everything. And I thought that's a great resource. But as a whole, in general, Kentucky is super confusing. Like, wow, super confusing. Okay, let's move on to Illinois. Landlord sets the rent and the security deposit amount. There is now a maximum security deposit of up to 2 months rent for an unfurnished unit and up to 3 months rent for furnished units. So I hope you have some rent there, tenants. Wow. The landlord does not have to give the tenant a reason for non-renewing the lease. No reason needed, just done. There is, however, quite a few different laws in different places, including different counties and municipalities and suburbs, including Chicago, of course. Many, many times the resources stated straight up, contact a lawyer in this local area or see the specific municipality or county for more details. It said that again and again and again in the resources. One funny note that the city of Chicago did have a specific comment about porch safety, like a deck porch safety, that porches have to be designed to support a live load of 100 pounds per square foot. Thought that was kind of interesting. It was just like all this legal jargon and then, oh, by the way, porch safety. Okay. Colorado gives has 3 days notice for non-payment of rent or for notice to correct mischief. 3 days. 3 days to smarten up. That's pretty crazy. Statewide rent control. Colorado has a legislation, part of their residential tenancy. It says no county or municipality may make legislation impacting rent control. It is governed by the state only. Now, there are other things that are done by municipalities in different counties, but not rent control. Security deposit is maximum 2 months rent amount. Plus, if there is a pet involved, there could be a maximum $300 pet deposit additional. A late fee in Colorado is either 5% of the rent amount due or $50, whichever is higher, and it is due after 7 calendar days. Colorado has great information about how to have roommates work with each other. There was 3 pages in the resources on specifically cohabitating with roommates, strangers trying to make things work. It was really good. So if this is your situation, Colorado has some great resources. Yukon Territory. I love Canadian provinces and territories. They seem to do it really good. Well, there's certain things I like about it. But Yukon does it good. Lots of resources, including standard forms of all kinds, really good. Tenant application fees are not permitted in the Yukon. And while late fees were discussed, there was no amount given. So I'm not sure if that's a permitted fee or not. If you buy a rental unit or units that have a below market rent, as a buyer, you can make the application to the Yukon Residential Tenancy Office to potentially have an additional 3% above the published allowed rent increase for the next 3 years. But to make that argument, you must also make an application not only to the Residential Tenancy Office, but also to the affected tenants as well. Lots of information about pet deposits, very realistic about pets. Okay, New Jersey. Oh my goodness. Super, super, super technical to the point I was exhausted. Super technical, lots of different rules, rent control in different locations, renter's insurance is required for tenants in the Garden State, and all units must be registered with some type of government entity, and they have all kinds of technicalities of who you register with and how it's all done. Excellent glossary where I learned the definition of distraint is when a landlord takes a tenant's personal possessions to secure payment for rent or other debts. This episode, you have to really, really know your stuff. So if you're a landlord in New Jersey, you have got to know your stuff. I was shocked at how technical it is. There are rules on top of rules there in New Jersey. My goodness. Queensland, Australia, my first location-specific episode outside of North America. Different nomenclature for Australia, including body corporate, bond, and penalty units. So let me just tell you what those are real quick. Body corporate is Australia's word for strata. If you're in Canada, it's a strata. If you're in the States, it's either condo or a homeowners association. Same thing, where the individual owners own the units or rent the different units, but there's common areas, common shell, but they call it body corporate in Australia. So that's part of that. Bond is their notation for a security deposit, and penalty units. Now I'll tell you about penalty unit. It is a form of a fine that can be changed in the amount from time to time. Now, at the time of recording, one penalty unit in Australia is worth $166.90 Australian. And some of the fines for doing items incorrectly as a landlord had a fine of 20 penalty units, which is equivalent to $2,200 US dollars or just over 3,000 Canadian dollars. Now, there are 3 different tenancy aspects in Queensland, which was incredible to see, including general tenancy, mobile dwelling unit, including a caravan, and a roommate situation. So general tenancy is like a single family home or an apartment or a condo, someplace like a permanent dwelling. Mobile dwelling is like an RV or a caravan. They call it a caravan. And a roommate situation. So you're renting a room. All 3 have different requirements for leases. All 3 have different move-in, move-out checklists. And all 3 have a different threshold and actions for abandoned items and tons of pre-made forms, which are my favorite. Super interesting and different. So if you want to see something completely different than what you're expecting, listen to that episode. Really interesting. Okay, Pacific Islands, which is a U.S. territory. It includes American Samoa, Guam, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, CNMI. I couldn't remember at the beginning of the episode. CNMI. Now, I've already done a location-specific episode on Guam, episode 150, which has a population of 150 and change U.S. citizens, heavily influenced by the U.S. military. So in this episode, which is episode 201, I focus primarily on the other two. So American Samoa and CNMI, which is combined just over 100,000 people. Now, both of these locations are multiple islands and they're spread out over lots of places. And so they're quite disjointed. Okay. Now, I found some interesting non-real estate items related articles to help give context to these locations. So I threw all that in, right? Like I tried to give you some context. And I did find the CNMI Landlord Tenant Rental Act of 2017 to share with you, but there was little else regarding housing regulation in these locations. Maybe that makes sense. CNMI, I have found, has been referred to as the Wild West of real estate. And with some searching, I found little more than what I'm explaining right here. In fact, many of my searches about these locations, ironically, because I'm filming this in Maui, they resulted in Hawaii-based tenant information, which of course is not correct. But that episode is interesting nonetheless. So in each of these, now of course, every location I just explained, there is a full episode, which is somewhere between 40 and 60 minutes. Each one has its own episode for that location. And they all answer the same four questions. What are the basics of that location's tenancy laws and governing for housing? 2, what are the nuances of that location? 3, some guidance about items that a tenant that has abandoned the property has left behind. And 4, where to get help in your local real estate, that state, province, district, whatever is applicable. This is the same format for every specific location-specific episode. So if you're interested in another geographic area, you already know how I'm going to do it. Now, of course, these episodes are not all inclusive. I have to give you my disclaimer. You must research further in your specific area because everything can change without notice. And even if I get it all right, chances are I didn't get it all right, that I missed something. And then, of course, it can change 5 minutes later. So, but today's summary episode will let you know what just got added to the library overnight. Who knows? I suspect you'll be thumbing through the podcast library at My Life as a Landlord, and there'll be 1 or 2 or 10 episodes that you might just bookmark. So if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're either a current landlord, about to be a landlord, or you want to be in a certain location. So please visit My Life as a Landlord episode library to go through your specific location and learn more, because this is not it. There's a bunch more that are in the library. Check them all out. Now, if you don't see your location yet, just have a little patience. There is more on the way. Don't forget to subscribe for more expert advice and real estate stories from across the globe. Today, as I mentioned, I'm in Maui, Hawaii. Why do I always say that? Because real estate takes you places. Where do you want real estate to take you? Join me in the first location-specific episode in this tranche, live right now in the library, episode 191, about the great U.S. state of Minnesota. I'll see you there.